We're doing a react. Content. I was told this is a good video. Ukrainian neo-Nazis far from Fringe. And anything but Powerless from the Revolution Report. I can't speak to this content.
But this isn't a place, with all due respect, you know, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. You know, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European. I have to choose those words carefully.
Oh my God, dude. He catches himself in real time. I'll never get over this video.
Sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation.
Oh my God. You got Nazis right there. Those are Nazis.
If you're living in the West looking for something other than a mainstream media perspective on what's going on in Ukraine, oh boy, buckle up, because this video's for you. We've all heard Russia's claim that Ukraine is infested with armed neo-Nazis who basically run the show over there. It's one of Moscow's main justifications for launching its special operation in the first place.
Федеральным собранием 22 февраля года договоров о дружбе и взаимопомощи с Донецкой Народной Республикой и Луганской Народной Республикой мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима. Мы будем стремиться к демилитаризации и денацификации Украины.
And of course, there are only two acceptable responses to this in the West.
They are
Get a fucking microphone, bro.
just fringe groups. Pudler is the real Nazi.
Or,
how can Ukraine be run by Nazis if Zelensky is Jewish?
Putin has the gall to say he's denazifying Ukraine. It's a lie.
say you were to do something that the vast majority of people don't do. Say you were to, at the very least, consider the idea that perhaps neo-Nazism is a little too popular in Ukraine. What do you think people around you would say? Your neighbors, your normally apolitical friends who all of a sudden have become experts in geopolitics. The same ones who say Russia is the new Nazi Germany and really believe they formed that opinion for themselves. The mainstream media has done such a fantastic job of manufacturing consent, censoring opposing viewpoints, and somehow convincing everyone that they live in the free world, that Joseph Goebbels himself, in his wildest dreams, couldn't have hoped to achieve such success. And that's why you need to join us on a journey to discover the true extent to which neo-Nazis have really taken power in Ukraine. All the information's out there, you just gotta look for it. And
I'm in.
We're gonna bring it to you here on the Revolution Report.
I'm in. Who's this guy? Who's this guy? Revolution Report? Good content? Let's fucking go.
For most people who had never given Ukraine or its history more than a passing glance, and for anyone who's not Slavic, that's most people, accusations that the country is dominated by neo-Nazis may seem out of left field. But alas, it is not. You could say the country's history of right-wing extremism goes at least as far back as World War II, when a substantial amount of Ukrainians straight up collaborated with the Nazis and helped them to exterminate Jews and communists. After the war, they obviously found themselves on the losing
How do you forget about the 150,000 Poles?
side, but for years they continued to fight a guerrilla conflict against the USSR with the help of American and British intelligence services. Don't get me wrong, there were also a lot of Ukrainians who took up arms against the Nazis in World War II. They became known as
Partisans, right? These days they'd call you Putin's bitch.
pro-Soviet insurgents that fought Nazi occupation, mainly from the countryside.
I don't call people that. I don't call people bitch. I don't say that.
People mostly came from around Donbass. That's the area that has since declared independence, and the West incorrectly says is occupied by Russia. See the connection? Anyway, we're not going to get too much into that history because we already made a video that covers it in more depth. Make sure to check out the link for it in the description. What we want to focus on are the existing active neo-Nazi organizations in Ukraine. What kind of power do these organizations have? What kind of influence does their ideology have on the state? Everybody in the West knows about the Azov Battalion, the neo-Nazi military unit that gets the most attention from the Western media. And that is no accident.
They're currently holed up in the steel factory.
Strategy of Western propagandists in this information war.
They're currently holed up in the steel factory, possibly holding women and children hostage. Perhaps just using them as human shields. And they're ginning up sympathy from Western media. It's insane.
Is to trivialize as much as possible the Russian government's claims that Ukraine has a neo-Nazi problem. What better way to do so than to put all of the bad eggs in one basket, and then whitewash both their heinous crimes and their ideology? They're not a neo-Nazi organization, but a far-right nationalist one with neo-Nazi origins. They may be radical, but they're defending their country against the real Nazis, the Russians.
And yet it is
oh my God, I've literally heard that talking point. They go, no, Russia's the real Nazis, so we have to give arms to the people with the Nazi symbols on their arms because they're not actually Nazis. Despite them, like, doing the Nazi salute and, like, literally wearing Nazi patches. They got the Nazi S, and they also got the Black Sun. NATO cannot help but post pictures of Nazis and ginning up. NATO cannot help but gin up sympathy for Nazis on accident on International Women's Day of all days. So I don't know. Very balanced journalism. It is a fucking mind maze. Yeah.
Clear that no regime of this century better resembles the Third Reich than Putin's Russia. The extent of the Kremlin's atrocities underscores their depraved and historic indifference.
I like the use. Do a barrel roll. You're in a mind maze. I co-sign the use of Comic Sans.
Toward human life.
Awesome.
We've seen that in Russia's 8-year war in the Donbass, which has killed more than
Not this font, though. Get a better font.
14,000 people. Because what we're seeing today is reminiscent of the 1933 Russian genocide in Ukraine.
I don't know about this.
Known as the Holodomor. That's when Joseph Stalin purposefully starved to death upwards of 4 million Ukrainians.
In the end, you have a perfectly packaged, seemingly fringe organization of evil, but necessary jerks that people will find bitter, but be able to swallow. Throw in a little, well, what about freedom of speech? And
they did the Holodomor double genocide myth? Oh, no, man. Yo, I'm just gonna say, like, I'm tired of libs pretending genocides. You know? I'm tired of them just making it up.
And they will be just as ignorable an injustice as the
and then, of course, they ignore other genocides that actually happen.
The existence of the Ku Klux Klan or other white supremacist organizations in the United States. It's clearly been a very successful strategy, based on the fact that people simping for Kiev have been parroting these mainstream media talking points in the comment sections of my videos. But let's cut the crap. Anyone who understands Ukrainian history knows that both Ukrainian neo-Nazis and Ukrainian nationalists share the same political heritage. Plus, the Azov Battalion's horrific acts have been laid bare for all to see. Back in 2014, when the Western-backed Euromaidan coup d'etat came to power, even the usually Western-aligned organization, Amnesty International, was accusing the group of, quote, ISIS-style war crimes, including abductions, executions, and torture. For the last 8 years, Azov has been one of the most enthusiastic frontline battalions that was indiscriminately bombing innocent people in Donbass, sabotaging their access to clean water and electricity, and now that they're in an all-out war with Russia, they've become more brutal than ever. Like I said, though, the Western media's exclusive focus on Azov is an attempt to make it look like there aren't exactly that many neo-Nazis. So who else are we talking about here? Well, there's the Ukrainian Donbass.
Try to do the whole Holodomor with your girlfriend. Just ask, you know, well, the United States, we had the Dust Bowl at the same time. Was the United States government also genociding its citizens at the same time? Is that what happened?
Donbass battalion, which often fights
You actually might get close to the truth on that one, to be
alongside Azov, and you might be able to get away with calling it a nationalist battalion rather than neo-Nazi, but like I said earlier, there's not much of a difference. It's joined Azov hand in hand to commit the same atrocities, like sexually assaulting a mentally disabled man back in 2016, and in 2014 it took a direct role in militarily occupying the People's Republics of Donbass, as well as dissolving the Communist Party and its pro-Russian allies there. A number of the battalion's fighters were even brought to court on charges of banditry, extortion, abduction, armed robbery, among other things. They didn't have to worry about any jail time, though, since the company's former commander was able to pressure the judges into making sure that they were innocent. We can't forget about Right Sector, one of Ukraine's most powerful neo-Nazi organizations. It's got a political party as well as a paramilitary wing, and it was one of the most aggressive organizations that transformed peaceful protests into an all-out violent coup d'etat during Euromaidan in 2014. They're likely most known for the crimes they committed on May 2nd, 2014, when Right Sector neo-Nazis burned dozens of people alive in the Odessa Trade Union building. To this day, Ukrainian authorities have not prosecuted one person involved. These neo-Nazis were at the front lines when Kiev invaded the People's Republics of Lugansk and Donetsk in 2014. They indiscriminately killed and tortured the people of Donbass alongside Azov over the past 8 years, and now that Moscow has finally stepped in to denazify them, Right Sector is fighting the Russians too. What really boggles my
Wow, he goes with the denazify line.
mind, though, is that all these Silicon Valley liberals are always talking about how much they love liberalism and ethnic minorities and whatever, but almost all of them have blocked Russian media on their platforms and at the same time are allowing literal neo-Nazis to recruit people into their armed militias on those same platforms. This video you're about to see I found on Right Sector's YouTube channel while I was researching this video.
Брати і сестри незборимої нації, чобіт російського окупанта вже ступив на нашу священну землю. Ставайте до лав добровольчого українського корпусу «Правий сектор».
Then again, we shouldn't be too surprised, because the State Department and the US Embassy in Ukraine have long invited members of Right Sector to speak at official events. Another neo-Nazi group fighting Russian and Donbass forces is called IDAR. Like most of these armed neo-Nazi groups, IDAR has been integrated into the Ukrainian armed forces and is now officially part of the 53rd Mechanized Brigade. Surprise, surprise, once again, even Amnesty International says this group has committed a number of war crimes in Donbass. Abductions, torture, killing journalists and civilians.
They're not talking about this now. They talked about it in 2014. If they talk about it now, they're going to be called Putin's bitch.
Are among them. Even the Kiev-appointed governor of Ukrainian-occupied Lugansk said back in 2014 that IDAR was terrorizing the region. Back then, the group was stopping humanitarian aid headed towards the Lugansk.
Just like 1984 Animal Crossing.
People's Republic, which half of the population relied on at the time. And during the recent hostilities, Russia's Ministry of Defense accused IDAR of not allowing civilians to leave through humanitarian corridors out of Mariupol, where some of the most
incredible. Here's the thing. We don't know. We don't know what's happening. Fog of war. But, of course, Western media is only presenting to you one side.
Intense fighting has taken place. This group, along with Azov, has been widely accused of setting up firing positions right next to schools and hospitals, with the explicit purpose of drawing Russian fire in those directions. Now,
I've been talking about this.
Now we move on to C-14.
C-14? 14 words? Nazis?
and National Druzhina, the latter of which is a sister organization to Azov.
Google it.
I mention them together because they're both known for
Google 14 words Nazis if you need help on that.
The same kinds of crimes, repeated attacks on Romani people and widespread destruction of their living areas. C14 also regularly attacks leftists and anti-fascists, and if we compare different...
You will not see this on Western media. This is allegedly Roma people getting beat by sort of Nazi types in Kiev.
Statements from its leader, Yevhen Karas, we get a good illustration of what the difference between neo-Nazism and nationalism actually entails in Ukraine. On the one hand, Karas said to Mongolian television in 2018, quote, "We don't consider ourselves a neo-Nazi organization. We're clearly Ukrainian nationalists." On the other hand, back in 2014,
those things are not mutually exclusive.
Karas told the BBC that his main confrontations have been with those who apparently controlled Ukraine's political and economic forces. As he put it, the quote, Russians, Jews, and Poles. C14 even receives Ukrainian taxpayer money for, and I quote once more, educational purposes. And National Druzhina does too through Azov, since it's an official military regiment. Apart from those organizations, there are others like the White Hammer, a vigilante organization connected to Right Sector, but they are by and large insignificant. So now you know that there are powerful armed neo-Nazi organizations besides Azov in Ukraine. But maybe that's not enough to convince you that neo-Nazi organizations play a huge role in Ukrainian politics. After all, there are neo-Nazi organizations all around the world, even in Russia, and not a single neo-Nazi...
This guy'd look great with a big old mustache.
...Nazi party has made significant parliamentary gains in Ukraine. Well, my friend, I'm here to tell you something that should be obvious to anyone who's not a liberal. Elected MPs decide very little. To understand what it means for Ukraine to be fascist and what it means for Russia to not be, we have to first correctly define what the state actually is. The only way we can do that is the dialectical...
I can't remember what that flag is. I can't remember. I remember it was something based. Someone help me with that flag. I'm really into flags. I need to know that flag.
Materialist way. In his groundbreaking work, The State and Revolution, Vladimir Lenin described the state as special bodies of armed men having prisons, etc. at their command. We are justified in speaking of special bodies of armed men because the public power, which is an attribute of every state, does not directly coincide with the armed population, with its self-acting armed organization. In the case of Ukraine, the people with guns and an ideology are neo-Nazis, and they most certainly do not coincide with public power. Back in 2015, neo-Nazis nearly overthrew the government for a second time because they weren't happy with how the war was going in Donbass. Kiev was basically told that the Minsk protocols, which were supposed to establish a ceasefire in Donbass, would not be respected, and they weren't. And this gave rise to one of Russia's main reasons for sending troops in the first place, the fact that the protocols ended up being worth less than the paper they were signed on. There's also the fact that these neo-Nazi groups are mostly integrated into the official Ukrainian armed forces, which means whatever weapons and money go to Kiev in the form of Western aid end up in the hands of armed neo-Nazis.
This is the problem. I've been saying this for 2 months. And people canceled their fucking Patreon subscriptions to my channel. They're like, I'm so disappointed. I'm like, dude, I don't look up to you, but I could really use the money. Right? It's just wild stuff.
Legislation like the US's 2018 ban on arms shipments to Azov can have any effect on that. But what about the actual Ukrainian state and its laws? Surely they're at least liberal. Spoiler alert, they're not. In 2015, Kiev signed the bill on the legal status and perpetuation of the memory of fighters of the independence of Ukraine in the 20th century. This law glorified militant groups from the Second World War like the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which literally collaborated with the Nazis. That organization's leader, Stepan Bandera, was even made a national hero in another piece of legislation on memorable dates and state anniversaries in 2019. Streets were named after Bandera. Torchlit processions were made in his honor. Ukrainian school textbooks are teaching children of the, quote, Aryan origins of the Ukrainian people. There are literally children's camps run by the government-supplied Azov Battalion and C-14 militia where these Lil Cub Scouts sing Deutschland über alles while they're indoctrinated into Nazi ideology.
Oh, God.
Speaking of Azov, its first commander was also a people's deputy of Ukraine's parliament, and he said he wanted to, quote, lead the white races in a final crusade against Semite-led subhumans. If that's still not enough evidence for you of the blatantly institutionalized neo-Nazism in Ukraine, let's watch a Ukrainian news anchor quote a Nazi officer on air and openly call to genocide Russians.
Дотриматися зараз дуже важко, особливо в такий час, і якраз уже зацитувати слова Адольфа Ейхмана, який сказав, що для того, щоб знищити націю, потрібно нищити в першу чергу дітей. Тому що, вбиваючи їхніх батьків, діти виростуть і обов'язково помстяться. Вбиваючи дітей, вони ніколи не виростуть. І нація, знаюсь, раз ви вже називаєте нацистами, дотримуюсь доктрини Адольфа Ейхмана і зроблю все, що від мене залежить, для того, щоб ні ви, ні ваші діти ніколи не жили на цій землі.
All this just flies in the face of the West's claim that Ukraine's somehow a liberal bourgeois democracy. And all these copycat accusations that Russia's somehow a fascist country, the comparisons between Adolf Hitler and Vladimir Putin, they're even worse. What about the fact that it's illegal in Russia to desecrate a Soviet World War II monument?
Благодарные потомки посносили на Украине памятники Ленину. Это у них декоммунизация называется. Вы хотите декоммунизации? Нас это вполне устраивает. Но не нужно, что называется, останавливаться на полпути. Мы готовы показать вам, что значит для Украины настоящая декоммунизация.
Propaganda using Nazi symbolism is banned under Article 20.3 of Russia's criminal code. Russia does not praise Nazi collaborators. Every year, Russia tries to pass a UN resolution to combat the glorification of Nazism, and for the past 6 years, Ukraine and the US have been the only countries to vote against it. To me, it's really frightening just how many people don't understand how solid Russia's arguments for denazifying Ukraine really are. So many people have just jumped into the Ukrainian camp because the media told them to. At any rate, now that you understand how Nazified Ukraine really is, we've come to the most ridiculous of all arguments. That Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is Jewish, so neo-Nazis couldn't possibly run the show over there. First of all, no official from Russia or Donetsk or Lugansk has ever said that Zelensky was a neo-Nazi, so this argument is a straw man from the very beginning, but we'll just roll with it.
It's just kid shit, dude. Anyone who makes this argument, I get to go in my head, all right. I don't really have to care. But here we go.
He does seem pretty laid back, though, about the Azov Battalion's continued atrocities in Donbass.
Azov Battalion, that is said to be Nazi-affiliated organization operating as a militia in your country, said to be committing their own atrocities.
Azov was one of those many battalions. They are what they are.
After the Euromaidan coup d'etat, a US-backed neoliberal government came to power that could only rely on these armed neo-Nazi groups to do their criminal bidding in Donbass. But who supported these groups? From a long list of donors, one man appears at the top of the list, Igor Kolomoisky. He's a former governor of Ukraine's Dnepropetrovsk region, the second richest man in the country, and likely the main donor of Zelensky's victorious presidential campaign. He was even sanctioned by the US State Department for his involvement in significant corruption. Kolomoisky is also a big-time donor for a number of the neo-Nazi organizations we mentioned earlier in the video, including the Azov and Aidar battalions. And guess what? He's Jewish. Clearly, Jews can and do fund Nazi organizations sometimes. They can give neo-Nazis awards. They can even collaborate with them. I mean, in World War II, there were even Jewish Nazi collaborators back then. But the proof of the absurdity in this argument is actually apparent in the statements of those who use it. I'm talking about the Western politicians who love Zelensky and are inadvertently using Nazi and neo-Nazi slogans to express their support for him, and butchering the pronunciation at that.
The President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, Slava Ukraina!
Тому що світу потрібна вільна та суверенна Україна. Slava Ukraini.
Ever since Russia's military operation began, we've been hearing useful idiots and naive liberals parroting that slogan.
Slava Ukraini! Everyone say it with me! Slava Ukraini!
Little do they know it was popularized by Ukrainian Nazi collaborators and their descendants. It was banned in the USSR for exactly that reason and was used exclusively by neo-Nazis until Euromaidan came to power in 2014. So there you have it, a walkthrough of Ukraine's armed neo-Nazi organizations, evidence that they're not on the fringe, evidence that neo-Nazism has become so normalized in Ukrainian society that liberals don't even notice it's there anymore, or they think it's easy enough to just sweep under the rug. At any rate, we can only conclude that Ukraine needs some serious denazification. Hello comrades, thanks a lot for watching the video. If you liked it, make sure to share it with anyone who doubts that neo-Nazism is an actual problem in Ukraine. It would also be a big help if you gave the video a like, discussed some of the content in the comments section, subscribed, and hit the notification button to our channel. We're also all over social media, so make sure to check out the links in the description, and that includes now Odyssey. That's right, all of our content is automatically uploaded there as well, Odyssey, just in case the YouTube Gestapo tries to shut us down. I think it's only a matter of time, but we'll see. Anyways, if you want to do the most to help our channel, please consider becoming a patron. You'll get a bunch of perks, including having your name read out at the end of a...
Yo. It's got 7,000 subscribers on Revolution Report. Dang, dude. He's getting ready to get blocked. He's getting ready to get blocked on YouTube. Donald Quarter. Russia state-affiliated media. He's been tagged. Oh my god, dude. I would love that. When did I get that on my page? So he does press for RT. Awesome. That's incredible, huh? Yeah. Okay. Well, we just got to know a new content creator. I thought that was an extremely good video. I wish I made it. Way to go. Really good stuff. Yeah. Here's the video, chat. Go give it a like. Give it the upvote. That was great. All right, I'm going to post my reaction to this. And maybe we'll catch more of their content later. Yeah, maybe to sum it up, white supremacy. Worldwide problem. I'm going to go ahead. He's a student. He's a grad student studying Soviet history in Moscow. Oh, wow. Cool. That's pretty cool. All right, I dig it. I think I'm into this. I want to thank you all. Thank you. I want to thank you for being with me and spending your time. I'm going to end the YouTube clip. If you're still watching my YouTube clip, why don't you give me a little thumbs up? Give it a like right below. Click the like button. And subscribe. It's free to subscribe. Hit the bell. Okay? Make a comment below. It helps me in the algorithm. And why don't you join me and all these other based and awesome people here in my chat, twitch.tv/iDanSimpson. We do this each day, just about every day. And that's going to be that. That's going to be the clip. Please support on Patreon, patreon.com/iDanSimpson. Humongous shout out to all my patrons.